in his youth, in his, I don't know, it was 50s or so, he went to get he had a pilot's license, private pilot's license, and he went to get a physical, and he found that he had a heart problem. And so he took care of it and stuff, and they said, listen, you run that jewelry store all yourself. You need to calm down a little. You're too. And so he said, well, I guess I'll retire. And so he retired for a little while, and he didn't like how his other two brothers were running the store, and he felt like that they were not doing it the way he wanted it. So he went back and kind of got involved in it and stuff, and finally he worked for a while, and they said, you know, you retired. Why are you back here? And I went to work, and he said, I'll tell you what. I know you can't liquidate and give me my money. I want a third of it. How about if they had all the ZCMIs in Salt Lake? How about if we divided the store, the jewelry, and so it all equals. So Uncle Don figured that out, and Vern took over the ZCMIs and a lot of the jewelry that was up in there for his portion of the business. And he drove up to Salt Lake every week for a year or two, and just really pushed and got him really performing good, and then got an offer and sold it to a big chain, and then used that money to buy. Him and Ed Smith bought the shredder and then they bought Abby's recycling, and it was a pick-apart. They bought the shredder first, and the pick-apart. I'm sorry about the shredder and the tow company and the wrecking yard company, the Nevada pick-apart from Forrest Purdy. So I was still working the jewelry store, working for my cousins and stuff, and we'd gotten out of the fashion show. And Wayne and I kind of went and searched around to try to find a good place, and we found what we thought was a pretty good place. In the strip mall, we were very shy about getting into another big mall because the per square foot rent was so high. And finally we ended up getting into a mall, a strip mall up on Decatur and Flamingo. And we opened up a store there, and it was so-so, it was mediocre. I kept a lot of the same staff, but the sales were nowhere near as good, and we were back to the nickel and dime stuff like the Meadows Mall, and it was not that great. So I always started coming up with, hey, let's do this, let's do that. And I go to my cousin with ideas, and they'd say, no, we're not going to do that. No. Finally, one day, one of them came over to the store and said, I need to talk to you. And he said, listen, we appreciate what you're doing. You're the manager of this store. We'll support you in everything you do. But you need to understand, this is as far high up as you get in the company. You won't advance anywhere past the manager of this store. So you come up with all these ideas and stuff. You're trying to promote yourself in the company. That's just not going to happen. And I said, okay, thanks. And right then I just, what kind of a deal was that? I wasn't trying to, I knew I wasn't an owner. Those three were kind of in competition all the time. They have a 30-second commercial on TV. One of them would talk for 10 seconds, the other one would talk for 10 seconds, and the third one would talk for 10 seconds. And it was pretty stilted and pretty weird to see flashing through like that, but they did everything like that, made everything exactly equal. And And then they felt like they needed to come and tell me that I wasn't going to advance in the company at all. And I stopped coming up with ideas to further the business and make it okay. And by that time, Vern came over and said, how you feeling? What's going on? I said, well, I'm not super happy, but everything's okay, I guess. And so he said, well, at the shredder, do you want to earn a little extra money? And I said, sure. He says, well, we've got this nut and bolt company down the street that when they make nuts and bolts, they shave off this expensive some of it's nickel, brass, Monel, stainless steel, and they put all the grindings in a barrel there, and you have to go in and tend the barrels twice a day. Can you do that? And I said, yeah. So in the morning, before I went to work, I got on some tough clothes and go over there and move barrels around. They had different places. And he said, you got to kind of jolly up the guys, and a lot of them spoke Spanish, and I would go in there and talk to the operator and stuff. And what was bad is if they were doing all stainless steel and then they switched to brass, they put it in the same barrel, then you couldn't hardly separate it because it looked like spaghetti and it was all mixed together. So I would say, hey, can you do me a favor? Yeah, I'm going to do 2 tomorrow. Can you change? I'll come and try to change the barrels, but if not, can you do it? Oh, yeah. So they would change the barrels and clean out the machine and kept the stuff pretty good for me. And then on Saturdays, I had a pickup, and I take my pickup on a trailer, load the barrels on the trailer, take it out to the shredder, and they'd weigh it. And they didn't pay me for the weight; they paid me for a percentage of the weight because it was their customer. I just oversaw the account, so I got a percentage, and it was okay. And then Forrest Purdy's brother Ron had a wrecking yard and a recycling place, and he wanted to sell it. And Vern came to me and said, "Hey, do you want a job? I can't pay as much as you're making here, but I think it'll be more fun, and you can work up in it." And I said, "What?" He says, "Well, we're buying this wrecking yard, and we need somebody to go over and sit with Ron Purdy to get with all his customers and learn all about the recycling business and the pick apart. We know about the pick aparts, but it's got that too. You want that job? It pays this much." So I said, "Oh, okay." It was much closer to my house. It was like 15 minutes drive instead of 45 minutes drive. And that was one of the big things. And even though it was a little less, it wasn't that much less than I was making over at the other store because it wasn't nearly as successful as the fashion show as far as gross. I think the profit was better, but because we didn't have such a big rent. But anyway, so I gave my cousins notice and everything, and they put someone else over there, and I went over to Abby's wrecking yard and recycling center, and I had an awful lot of fun.